I begged my family for $10,000 and they laughed. Now they're demanding 40% of my $42 million company before Friday. Hi, I'm Luca, 34, and 5 years ago I asked my family for $10,000 to start a dream. They laughed. Now they want 40% of my $42 million company. The term sheet sat dead center on the mahogany conference table like a loaded weapon. Leather-bound. Thick as a hardcover Bible. And worth a hell of a lot more. $42 million, said the private equity guy Sterling. He was the kind of man who made eye contact like it was a power move. Tailored suit. Hair like a GQ spread. His watch probably cost more than my first kitchen's entire build-out. That's the valuation for a 60% stake in Smoke and Iron, he said. You stay on as CEO for a 3-year transition. We give you a cash exit of $25 million, pre-tax, plus rollover equity and a solid base salary. I didn't shake his hand. Didn't smile. I just stared at page 4, where the EBITDA multiplier was printed in glossy black ink. It was aggressive. The kind of number that rewires a family tree. Give me 48 hours, I said. My lawyer needs to review the non-compete. Sterling nodded. Friday at noon, Luca. Don't leave us hanging. I walked out of that high-rise into the cold, whip-sharp Chicago air and stood still for a second. I could smell the lake before I saw it. My fingers clenched around my truck keys. Same beat-up Ford from when I was scrubbing grease off vent hoods at 3 a.m. because I couldn't afford a cleaning crew. I had 3 missed calls from my mother. And a text from my older brother Dean. Mom's making roast. 7 p.m. Don't be late. We need to discuss the expansion. Expansion? They didn't know about the buyout. No one did but me and my lawyer. But they knew something was coming. And I knew exactly what they wanted. I turned the key and headed to the suburbs. I'd gone from begging for $10,000 to fielding a $42 million exit. And they had the audacity to call a family meeting. They thought I owed them. They had no idea. The roast smelled incredible. I'll give them that. My mom always knew how to set a table like it was the Last Supper. Linen napkins, candles, a salad fork no one used. I walked into the dining room and they were already seated, waiting. Dean at the head, like he owned the damn place. My sister Emily scrolling on her phone. My father pouring wine with a practiced wrist, all warmth and showmanship. The prodigal son returns. Dad boomed. He handed me a glass of Cabernet like we were old buddies. You look tired, Luca, Mom said, immediately undercutting the cheer. You need to slow down. Hire more help. I've got a COO, Mom. And a VP of operations. I'm fine. Dean leaned back in his chair, cut into the roast, and didn't look at me once. We read the piece in Cranes. 15 locations. Franchise momentum. Hell of a run. I didn't reply. I let the silence say it. He went on, like he'd rehearsed it in front of the mirror. I've been running numbers based on industry benchmarks. At 15 locations plus franchise royalties, you're probably pulling mid-8-figure revenue. And if you're running lean, which I know you are, your EBITDA's gotta be close to 20%. It was freakishly accurate. I said nothing. I think it's time we formalize the family partnership, Dean said, finally looking up. The what? Emily perked up like she was waiting for a cue. You know, the partnership. We've all been so supportive. Sharing posts. Talking you up to our friends. We even made that family TikTok, remember? We were in a TikTok? I asked. She nodded. It got 32,000 views. That's brand exposure. I blinked slowly. You want equity. For views. Dean slid a folder across the table. A real one. With tabs and an embossed cover. We're proposing a restructuring, he said. A legacy move. Since this business was built on the foundation of our shared values, upbringing, and emotional support. I held up a hand. Dean. Just say it. He smiled like it was a chess move. We want 10% each. You keep majority control. It's still your baby. But this is family. And you're buying in? I asked. At current valuation? They all shifted. Well, Dean said, we'd be coming in retroactively. So we'd buy in based on the original valuation. 5 years ago. 5 years ago. I repeated. I opened the folder. For buy-in proposals. $5,000 each. Total, $20,000. For 40% of a $42 million company. I laughed. It was sharp. Loud. Cold. You're serious? It's only fair. Mom said, her voice wobbling. You have more than enough now. Dean's got a mortgage. Emily's trying to freeze her eggs. I looked at all of them, then down at the paper in front of me. And I realized something. This wasn't dinner. This was an ambush. I sat back in my chair, arms folded, watching them like they were a focus group that had just pitched me a barbecue-flavored toothpaste. You want to buy 40% of my company for 20 grand, I said slowly. Because 5 years ago, you didn't believe in me. Dean had the nerve to nod. Exactly. It's full circle. No, I said. It's a shakedown. You asked us for money back then. Emily snapped. We didn't have it. You said you understood. I did understand, I said. What I didn't understand was that you'd come back around with a calculator and a smile once the valuation hit 8 figures. You're being dramatic, Mom said gently, reaching for my hand. I pulled it away. Her face fell like I'd slapped her. I pulled a tooth out of my mouth with pliers and bourbon, I said. Did I ever tell you that? The table went quiet. I had an abscess and no insurance. Couldn't afford a dentist. I bled into a paper towel and went back to work an hour later because payroll was due. But please, I gestured to Dean's stupid folder. Tell me again about your emotional labor. Dean cleared his throat. You're missing the bigger picture. This is generational wealth, Luca. You could secure your entire family's future. My future is secure, I said. Yours isn't my job. You're selfish. Emily snapped, voice tight. All this success turned you into an asshole. No, I said, standing up. This success revealed you. You didn't back me when it was risky. You waited until it was safe, then tried to walk in the side door. I tossed the folder back toward Dean. It slid through the gravy. That's not how this works, I said. You don't get to demand ownership of something you didn't help build. Dad stood slowly. You're upset. We get it. But think about what you're doing here, son. You're walking away from your family. For what? Pride? No, I said, walking toward the door. For peace. Dean stood too. If you leave, we'll take legal action. I turned. For what? There was a verbal agreement, he said. You promised us opportunities. That's enforceable. No, it's not. And if you try, I'll make it very public how you attempted to extort me for retroactive equity. I have the emails. And I recorded this conversation. I hadn't. But he didn't know that. Dean's mouth shut like someone had hit a kill switch. I have lawyers on retainer now, I said. Very good ones. They love courtroom drama. Try me. I left them at the table, stunned. The moment I got into my truck, I called my lawyer. Add a clause to the sale agreement, I said. Something airtight. No relative of mine can ever lay claim to smoke and iron. You got it, he said. Anything else? Yeah. Run it fast. We signed Friday. And that's when I realized what I felt wasn't anger anymore. It was clarity. I didn't sleep that night. Not from stress, adrenaline maybe, but mostly from the high of finally saying what I'd been thinking for years. I sat at my kitchen island, lights off, a single bourbon glass in my hand, and just stared out at the skyline. They had the nerve to call me selfish. The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls and 3 voicemails. 2 were from my mother. The third was from Emily, full crying voice, mascara smudged guilt, talking about how she'd always believed in me deep down. I didn't listen past the first 10 seconds. I forwarded all 3 to my lawyer with a simple note for file. By noon, my COO had finalized internal briefings about the transition plan. Friday was coming fast. The deal was real. The money was real. The only unreal thing left was how much I had let them take from me emotionally, for free, all those years. That night, a certified letter arrived at my condo, hand-delivered. It was from Dean. I opened it with a steak knife, already knowing it wasn't going to be good. Inside, a demand for mediation. A formal notice of intent to negotiate a fair familial compensation structure, prior to the sale of smoke and iron. It was written like he thought he was the protagonist in an Aaron Sorkin script. I laughed out loud. Legitimately laughed. My phone buzzed. A text from Mom. Please don't do this, Luca. We're still your family. It's just business. We love you. I stared at that message for a long time. It's just business. The same words Dean had used when I begged him for 10 grand 5 years ago, and he told me to get a real job with benefits. The same words Emily used when she refused to post a branded story for my launch week unless I sent her free product and a gift card. Business. That night, I did something I hadn't done in years. I pulled out the cot I used to sleep on in the dry storage room of my first location. It was still folded in the back of my closet, smelling faintly of smoke and desperation. I set it up in my living room, lay down, and stared at the ceiling. It wasn't nostalgia. It was a reminder. No one helped me. No one sacrificed. No one believed in it but me. So no one gets to eat off the plate now. Friday morning, I woke up to frost on the windows and a calm I hadn't felt since opening day of the first Smoke and Iron. It wasn't confidence. It was certainty. I threw on jeans, boots, and a clean black button-down, no tie, no flash. Just the same version of me that scraped gum off sidewalk benches outside our first location before doors opened at 11 a.m. I walked into the downtown office like I owned the building. Because after today, I damn near could. Sterling greeted me with that same shark smile. "Luca," he said, shaking my hand like we were closing a real estate deal in Monaco. "You ready to change your life?" I gave a tight smile. "It's already changed." We went over the paperwork in one of those boardrooms that smells like money and ambition. My lawyer sat beside me, meticulous and steady. We crossed every T, triple-checked the indemnity clauses, and inserted a line I insisted on personally. No current or former family members shall be entitled to, nor may assert any claim against, any equity, asset, or derivative belonging to Smoke and Iron Holdings or its successors, assigns, or officers. It was my firewall. At 12:14 p.m., I signed. Sterling stood and popped a bottle of champagne like we just closed on a yacht. Everyone clapped. I stayed seated. I was happy, but not loud. I had seen loud success before. It crashes fast. He handed me a glass, and I toasted quietly. "To the long nights," I said, "and to never needing permission again." An hour later, I was back in my truck, parked outside the first location. The original one. It was still open. Still thriving. The line was wrapped around the block like it had been on that miracle third weekend when we sold out of brisket by 3 p.m. I walked inside. The new GM, barely 25, greeted me like I was royalty. "Boss! Didn't know you were coming by." I waved him off. "Just hungry." I ordered what I always used to eat when I was broke and tired and proud, the rib plate, cornbread, greens. Ate it alone in the corner. No one bothered me. No one knew they were sitting 5 feet from a newly minted multimillionaire. Afterward, I drove to my bank. Wire transfer had hit. $25 million. Cash. It didn't make me emotional. It didn't feel like a dream. It felt earned. Like walking off a battlefield with your shield instead of on it. I asked the banker for a cashier's check. One last thing to do. The cashier's check was made out to the mortgage company that held the deed on my parents' house. I included a typed letter, short, anonymous, impossible to trace. "This account is now paid in full. No contact is necessary. Do not disclose the sender." Then I dropped it off in person. No doorbell. No note in the mailbox. Just the envelope, slid into the brass mail slot like a ghost, leaving one final debt on the altar. That house raised me, sure. But it also watched me get torn apart in the living room the day I pitched them my dream and they called it irresponsible. It was the scene of the crime and the shrine at once. Paying it off wasn't about forgiveness. It was about subtraction. Removing any remaining claim they might feel entitled to. I didn't want them thinking they gave me something. Because they didn't. That night, I poured a scotch, sat on my balcony, and typed out an email that would become the period at the end of the longest sentence of my life. Subject: moving on. I have paid off the house. That is my contribution to the family legacy. Do not contact me again. If you appear at any Smoke and Iron location, you will be escorted out by security. If you contact the media, I will release the email chain in which you attempted to extort me for pre-exit equity. I will also release audio from our conversation at dinner. I have legal counsel and PR on standby. This is not bitterness. This is a boundary. Good luck. Luca. I BCC'd my lawyer. Then I blocked their numbers. Their emails. Their social media accounts. Every digital thread they could use to stitch themselves back into my life got snipped clean. You would think that kind of closure would feel dramatic. Or sad. But it didn't. It felt surgical. Like removing a benign tumor before it had the chance to spread. 3 weeks later, I was in a small town in Wyoming. I'd flown in under the radar, rented a Jeep, and booked a motel under a fake name. No entourage. No press. I was scouting a new location. Not for another smoke and iron. Something else. Something smaller. Something mine. The town was called Brenton. Population, maybe 4,000 on a good day. One main street, 2 gas stations, and a diner with cracked leather booths and a waitress named Janine who'd been slinging coffee since Reagan was in office. I sat at the counter with a spiral notebook and a half-warm mug of black coffee. No laptop. No branded swag. No trace of smoke and iron on me. Just Luca, 34, wearing a hoodie and jeans, sketching floor plans on the back of a local real estate flyer. Janine poured me a refill. "You new in town?" "Just passing through," I said. "You're not a hunter, are you?" "Nope. Chef." She raised an eyebrow. "We got 2 restaurants already. One's a pizza place, other's this." She gestured around at the faded wallpaper and weak fluorescent lighting. "I'm thinking steakhouse," I said. "But small. Wood-fired. Farm to table. No QR code menus. Just a chalkboard and a handshake." Janine blinked. "Sounds fancy." "Not really. I want to cook for 30 people a night, max simple cuts. Local ranchers. Good whiskey. 1 dessert. That's it." She poured me a little extra. "Well, if you're hiring, let me know. My son's been looking for work. Can't seem to hold down anything longer than 2 weeks." I scribbled something in my notebook. "If I set this up, I'll hire local. Pay fair. Real benefits." Janine smiled. "We don't see much of that around here." "Yeah," I said, sipping. "That's the point." The next day, I toured a crumbling old auto shop 2 blocks off Main. It was perfect. Exposed brick, wide footprint, a garage bay I could turn into a wood-fired pit area. The realtor tried to pitch it as a craft brewery opportunity. I told him I'd pay cash, full ask, no financing. He almost cried. By the end of the week, I had the keys. No investors. No press release. No franchising potential. Just a stack of blueprints and a vision, a restaurant with no name yet, no gimmicks, no billion-dollar dreams. Just fire. Steel. Salt. Smoke. And space to breathe. That night, I sat on the hood of the Jeep under a sky that looked like spilled diamonds and realized something. This wasn't a pivot. This was a homecoming. 2 months later, I opened the doors to Fieldstone. No grand opening. No PR team. No guest list. Just a handwritten sign in the window that said, "Dinner starts at 5. Come hungry." It was me in the kitchen, one-line cook named Bo I hired out of the high school culinary program, and Janine's son, Connor, running front of house like he was born for it. Nervous kid, but respectful. Said, "Yes, sir," a little too often until I told him to knock it off or I'd start charging him for every "sir" on his tab. Our menu was 4 items. A 12-ounce ribeye with horseradish butter. A dry-aged sirloin over sweet corn hash. A charred beet salad with goat cheese and hazelnuts. And my grandmother's skillet peach cobbler. That was it. We didn't even have a printed menu. Just a chalkboard by the register, and my handwriting getting sloppier every night. And still, every night, we sold out by 7:30. Locals came first. Ranchers, teachers, retirees. People who had stopped expecting good food to show up in a place like this. People who weren't Instagramming their plates, they were finishing them. I was in the zone again. Not the build an empire zone. The real one. The zone where the only thing that mattered was the crust on the steak and the smile on a stranger's face when they tasted something they hadn't had since their mama was still around. Nobody asked about smoke and iron. Nobody cared about the Forbes profile or the Chicago skyline I used to stare at from my high-rise balcony. They cared about the food. The effort. The quiet. But back in the world I left behind, my name was still circulating. A friend from the old corporate office called one night. "Have you seen what's happening?" he asked. "Nope," I said, dicing shallots. "Smoke and Iron London opened yesterday. Q wrapped the block. You're trending on LinkedIn." "I'm trending?" "Yep. Greg posted a story. Said he helped you get started. Called himself a co-founder." I stopped chopping. My hands didn't shake. My voice didn't rise. I just felt that old burn in my gut again, The one that kept me up for a year straight sleeping on rice bags and caffeine. Let him post, I said. Let him write his fantasy. I've got better things to do. I hung up, walked back to the line, and dropped 2 steaks on the grill. Sizzle. Smoke. Peace. And outside, people kept coming. The first time a journalist tracked me down in Brenton, it was almost funny. She showed up at Fieldstone during prep, wearing a fleece Patagonia vest and confused city shoes. Looked like she'd expected valet parking and stumbled into a butcher's daydream. Hi. Luca? She said, all chipper nerves. I'm Elle. With Modern Hospitality Monthly. I flew in from New York. You're hard to find. That's on purpose, I said, not looking up from slicing duck breast. She laughed awkwardly. Right. Of course. Wow, this place. It's so minimalist. Is it true you walked away from a global brand to open a 30-seat restaurant in the middle of nowhere? 32. I said, wiping my hands. Fire code approved me for 32. She tried to interview me at the prep table. I told her if she wanted to talk, she had to peel garlic. She peeled exactly 6 cloves before asking if I had a quiet place to sit down. I don't sit down during service, I said. She didn't stay for dinner. That was the first article that called me the anti-chef. The next one said I had announced success. Another called Fieldstone a post-capitalist culinary retreat, which made me laugh hard enough to drop a ramekin. But the press didn't stop the locals. If anything, it brought a few curious tourists. The good kind. The ones who tip 30% and don't ask for substitutions. Then, one night, 6 months in, I was finishing up dishes when a letter came in. Handwritten. No return address. It was from Emily. Not a demand. Not a guilt bomb. Just a note. Luca. I saw the articles. I know you won't read this, but I'm writing anyway. I was wrong. I was shallow. I thought success meant money, and I didn't understand what it cost you. I've started therapy. I'm working 2 jobs. No more. Influencing. Just life. Real life. I hope you're well. I really do. Emily. I read it once. Folded it. Tossed it in the fire pit behind the restaurant. Not because I was angry. Not because I didn't believe her. But because forgiveness isn't always an event. Sometimes it's just choosing to keep walking in the direction you swore you'd never stop going. I cleaned the line, locked the door, and drove home under a sky that looked exactly the same as it did the day I signed the deal. But I wasn't the same. I stood outside Fieldstone one morning before dawn, coffee in hand, watching the first snow-dusty empty parking lot. It was quiet, the kind of quiet you don't notice until your brain stops buzzing like a generator. Inside, the smoker was already going. The air smelled like oak and memory. I unlocked the front door and flipped the sign to Prep in Progress. Bo was running late again. Connor would show up exactly on time, then apologize for not being early. It had become our rhythm. As I moved through the kitchen, checking inventory and adjusting the chalkboard menu, I caught myself humming. I didn't know the tune. Didn't care. That's when the phone rang. Nobody ever called Fieldstone. We didn't even have a real number, just a landline for invoices and the fire marshal. I let it ring once. Twice. On the third I picked up. Fieldstone. There was a pause. Then a familiar voice. Hey. Dean. I leaned against the counter, my face hardening. How'd you get this number? I called the county records office. He said. Told them I was your brother. Which I am. Not where it counts. He sighed. Look. I'm not calling to ask for anything. I saw the write-up in Eater. About what you built out there. And I realized how wrong we were. I didn't say anything. I was jealous. He went on. You risked everything. I sat behind a desk. And when you made it, I tried to jump on like I'd earned a seat. I didn't. You built something from nothing. And I'm sorry. I waited. Not because I needed him to keep talking. I just wanted to hear if the silence would crush him like it used to crush me. When it didn't, I said, apologies accepted. Dean exhaled like I'd lifted a piano off his chest. But that doesn't mean anything changes. I added. We're not going back. There's no reconciliation arc. No Christmas dinner. I know, he said. I just wanted to say it. For real. I'll let you go. He hung up. And I stood there for a moment, phone still in hand, trying to decide if I felt anything. I didn't. Not anger. Not sadness. Just nothing. And in that nothing was the proof that I was finally free. Bo came through the door a minute later, breath fogging the glass, rubbing his hands together. You get snow like this often? I shook my head. Not this early. He nodded toward the smoker. Ribs or brisket today? Both, I said. It's a good day for both. And it was. Because they would write more articles. People would keep asking why I walked away. Some would say I was bitter. Others would say I was brilliant. But none of them would really get it. Because what I did wasn't about the company. Or the check. It was about building a life where nobody else got to hold the pen but me. A few weeks later, a guy pulled up to Fieldstone in a rental SUV with out-of-state plates, leaned across the counter, and asked, Hey, you the guy who used to run Smoke and Iron? I didn't answer right away. Just wiped my hands on a towel and raised an eyebrow. He laughed. Guess that's a yes. I'm in from L. A buddy of mine said this place is the real deal. Like, no frills, no hype, just honest food. That word, honest, landed harder than he probably meant it to. I nodded toward a table. Pick a seat. I'll send something out. He left with a medium rare sirloin and a kind of smile that only comes from eating exactly what your body didn't know it needed. After he left, I found a crumpled 20 tucked under his empty plate. On the napkin, he'd scribbled one sentence. That meal made me want to call my dad. I stood there staring at it, that damn note, longer than I care to admit. Sometimes you forget what food really is. It's not just profit margins and Instagram angles. It's warmth. Permission. A reminder you're still human. Back at the sink, Connor was drying pint glasses with too much force. Everything good? I asked. He shrugged. Yeah. Just thinking. About? He hesitated. My girlfriend's pregnant. I leaned against the prep table, raised an eyebrow. You're 19. I know, he said, eyes wide. I'm freaking out. You tell her? She's freaking out too. I nodded. Okay. Step 1, you breathe. Step 2, you don't bail. Step 3, you show up every day, scared out of your mind, and you do the damn work anyway. He stared at me like I'd handed him a manual no one else had. I clapped him on the shoulder. You'll be fine. But you're gonna be tired forever. Get used to it. Later that night, after we'd locked up and split a cheap six-pack behind the kitchen, he asked me why I never went big again. Why I didn't take the cash from the buyout and build a new empire. I looked at him and said, because there's nothing I want that costs millions of dollars. He blinked. That's kinda deep. No, Connor, I said. That's kinda freedom. It was a Thursday when the package showed up. No name. No return address. Just a thick, padded envelope sitting on the front step of Fieldstone, dropped off between the morning bread delivery and the firewood stack. I brought it inside, opened it with a paring knife. Inside was a first edition copy of Kitchen Confidential, wrapped in butcher paper, and a yellow post-it stuck to the front page. Still my favorite chef. No strings attached. Just respect. Emily. I stared at it for a long time. I don't know if it was the book, the note, or just the fact that she hadn't asked for anything. No apology this time. No backhanded pitch. Just a gesture. I put the book on the shelf above the prep station, next to the spice rack. Never said a word about it to anyone. 2 days later, a young couple came in just before close, probably on a road trip, judging by the tired eyes and cracked phone chargers hanging out of their pockets. She was visibly pregnant. He looked like he'd been driving for 12 hours straight. You still serving? He asked. We saw the lights. I glanced at the clock. We were technically closed. But I nodded. You like steak? I could eat a cow, the guy said. Perfect, I said. Give me 15 minutes. I made them a pair of sirloins, medium rare. Roasted carrots. A cobbler I had left over from the lunch shift. Sat them by the window where the snow was coming down in quiet little spirals. They ate like it was their first meal in days. When they finished, the guy tried to hand me a credit card. I waved him off. First one's on the house, I said. Welcome to Wyoming. They left glowing. Connor watched them go, then turned to me. You comp a lot of meals these days. Only the ones that matter. He nodded, like he was starting to get it. I didn't build Fieldstone to make a killing. I built it to stop bleeding. And somehow, in the middle of nowhere, with a line cook still learning how to trim fat and a dining room that smelled like cedar and hope, I had everything I needed. Spring came late to Brenton, but when it arrived, it hit like a reset button. The snow melted in a day, revealing sidewalks, cigarette butts, and wild patches of crocus pushing up like they had something to prove. The tourists started showing up again, fewer Patagonia vests, more sunburned forearms and dusty pickup trucks. Fieldstone started getting walk-ins from as far as 2 towns over. No reservations, no gimmicks, just people following rumors about a nameless steakhouse run by a guy who used to be somebody. I didn't mind the myth. Let it grow taller than me. Connor came in one morning holding an envelope like it was radioactive. "You got a letter," he said. "From your dad." I didn't move. "How do you know?" "It says your father on the return address." Fair point. I took the envelope, didn't open it. Just slid it under the counter, next to the fire extinguisher. 2 hours later, I burned it. Not out of rage. Not even resentment. Just a simple understanding: some doors don't need to be opened, even if there's someone knocking. That night, I was locking up when Bo, my line cook, now 20, with 3 tattoos and a serious thing for cast iron, came up to me looking weirdly nervous. "You got a second?" I nodded. "What's up?" "I want to open my own place someday," he said, eyes darting. "I know I've got a lot to learn, but I want to do it right. Like you did. Small. Honest." He swallowed hard. "Would you teach me? Like, for real?" I didn't answer right away. I thought about the kid I used to be, sleeping on sacks of rice, jaw aching from a tooth infection, not even knowing what cap table meant. And I thought about what it would have meant to hear someone say, "Yeah? I'll teach you." I clapped a hand on Bo's shoulder. "You show up every day and stay humble, I'll show you everything." His whole face lit up. He started to say something, but I cut him off. "And when you open your spot, you don't put my name on it. You don't call it inspired by or mentored by. You make it yours. And when people ask how you got started?" I smiled. "You say you earned it." By summer, Fieldstone had hit its stride. No more articles. No more unexpected visitors with press badges and recording devices. The buzz had cooled, and in its place was something better: regulars. Locals. People who didn't care about my backstory, only that their steak was cooked right and their glass never ran dry. I had what every chef really wants: consistency. Then one afternoon, a reservation came in under the name Stonebridge Capital. It stopped me mid-sentence during inventory. Sterling. He walked in wearing the same perfect suit, though a little more relaxed this time. No tie, collar open, watch still worth more than a college education. He didn't bring a team. Just himself. "Took me a while to find you," he said, sliding into a booth near the back. "You disappeared." "Didn't disappear," I said. "I just stopped answering." He looked around. "This place is pure. That's one word for it. You know," he said, leaning forward, "the London expansion is exploding. Your brand is outperforming projections by almost 30%. The board misses you. I don't miss them." He nodded like he expected that. "There's talk of a buyback clause. A consulting arrangement. You'd get a seat on the board," voice in the direction. "No." He blinked. "You haven't even heard the offer." "I don't need to." Sterling sighed. "You walked away from a global brand that still has your name in the DNA. Why?" I gestured around the room. "Because I can see every inch of this place from where I'm standing. I know every plate that leaves the kitchen. I know the rancher who raised the beef and the high school kid washing the dishes. I'm not a brand here. I'm a man doing the thing I was born to do, with no shareholders and no spin." Sterling sat back. Studied me. Then he smiled. A real one this time. "Well," he said, "if you ever decide to get bored of integrity, you've got my number." He left a $100 bill under his empty water glass and disappeared into a black Escalade with tinted windows. That night, Connor asked who the guy was. "Old life," I said, stopping by to see if I was still dead. "You are?" "No," I said. "I'm just not for sale." Late August brought wildfire skies, burnt orange sunsets, smoke drifting in from states away, the air thick enough to taste. Brenton kept moving like it always did, slow and steady, but everything felt like it was waiting for something to break. One night, after closing, I found Connor sitting out back behind the kitchen, feet up on a milk crate, cigarette burning low. Everything okay? I asked. He didn't answer right away. Just took a drag, then exhaled slow. My dad called, he said finally. Says he wants to be involved now. Said he's proud of me for sticking it out. I nodded. Waited. He walked out when I was 9. Never came to a game, never called. But now that I've got this job, now he's proud. He flicked the ash onto the gravel. What do you even do with that? I sat down beside him. You let it be true. He turned to me. Even if it's too late? Especially then. He studied me for a second. That what you did? I thought about that first family dinner. The buy-in proposal sliding across the table like an insult wrapped in linen. My mom's voice cracking when she said I had more than I could ever spend. Dean's panic when I said the number out loud. I did something different, I said. I built a wall. Then I lit the blueprint on fire. Feel good? No. But it feels finished. Connor looked back out at the dark. You think I'll be a good dad? I clapped him on the back. If you show up, you're already ahead. We sat there in the quiet, smoke in the air, just two guys trying to do better than what came before. Later, alone in the kitchen, I looked up at the shelf above the prep table. Kitchen Confidential still there, still untouched. I thought about Emily's note. About how people try sometimes, even when it's messy and late. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I picked up the book. Opened it. Read the first line out loud. Good food is very often, even most often, simple food. I smiled. Exactly. The first frost hit Brenton early that year. It came overnight, sheets of glittering white stretched across rooftops and pickup beds, a quiet warning that winter wasn't far behind. I got to Fieldstone before sunrise, flipped on the lights, and stood in the middle of the dining room, just breathing it in. The silence. The peace. That's when I noticed the voicemail. Landline. Blinking red light. Only a few people even had the number. I hit play. It was my mom. Her voice was soft. Older. Not the crisp, cutting tone I remembered from the dinner table power plays. This was different. Luca, I don't know if you'll hear this, but I wanted to say thank you. For the house. We know it was you. The bank called eventually. Your father doesn't want to admit it, but I think he cried when we got the letter saying it was paid off. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know we're proud. Truly. You did something we didn't have the courage to believe in. I hope you're happy. That's all any of us ever wanted. The message ended. No callback number. No dramatic closing. Just that. I stood there for a long time, staring at the machine like it might say more. It didn't. I didn't erase the voicemail. Didn't save it either. I just left it. That night, the dinner rush was brisk. We served 31 guests. I cooked every steak myself. When we turned the lights off and the last dish was washed, I sat on the back step with a cold beer and watched my breath drift into the dark. Connor came out and sat beside me. Didn't say a word. Just handed me a folded piece of paper. I opened it. It was a rough sketch. A restaurant layout. Tables, kitchen, back office. A name at the top. Low Ember. I smiled. Yours? He nodded, nervous. One day. You'll get there, I said. He looked over. You sure? I took a sip, leaned back, eyes on the stars. Yeah, I said. But don't ask your family for money. We both laughed. That night, before bed, I turned my phone off. Fully off. No notifications. No buzzes. No news from London. No updates from the boardroom. Just the sound of Wyoming wind rattling the windowpane, and the knowledge that tomorrow, I'd wake up and do it all again. Not for an empire. Not for revenge. Just for me. The snow came in thick by the second week of November. Not the pretty dusting kind, this was the heavy, wet stuff that soaked through boots and bent tree limbs like they owed money. Business slowed. Locals stayed home. Tourists vanished. Even the regulars trickled in less, apologizing with sheepish grins and frostbitten faces. The chalkboard menu shrank to 2 entrees and a single dessert. It didn't matter. I liked it lean. One night after close, I was elbow-deep in dishwater when Connor came in from the back, his jacket dusted with snow. You got a visitor, he said. I dried my hands, walked to the front door. Emily was standing outside. Hands buried in her coat. Eyes cautious. I opened the door, and for a second we just looked at each other. I read the voicemail. She said. Mom told me she called. Surprised she didn't CC you. She gave a dry smile. I didn't come to argue. I'm not here to ask for anything. I just wanted to see it. She stepped inside. The warmth hit her face, and she exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for years. This is beautiful, Luca. It's simple, I said. That's what makes it beautiful. She walked slowly, touched the back of one of the chairs, looked up at the exposed beams. You remember that night? She asked. The roast beef. The equity proposal. God, I was such a brat. You all were. She laughed soft. Then, quieter. I'm sorry. I didn't answer. She turned back to me. I'm not trying to fix anything. I know some things stay broken. I had to say it. To your face. I nodded. Thank you? She started for the door. Then paused. I'm trying to open a coffee shop, she said. Nothing crazy. Just a place in the city where people can sit and feel seen. I waited. I'm not asking for help, she said. I just thought you'd understand the need. I do. She smiled again. This time it felt real. Take care, big brother. Then she was gone, swallowed up by the snow and the dark. Back in the kitchen, Connor was scraping the flat top. Everything okay? He asked. Yeah, I said, grabbing a towel. Just ghosts. He didn't push. Just kept working. I stood there a while longer, hands on the edge of the counter, thinking about how far we'd all come, and how far I'd had to go just to feel still. Sometimes people change. And sometimes you just change enough to stop caring whether they do. Thanksgiving in Brenton was a potluck kind of affair. Paper plates, folding tables, mismatched casseroles, and pie crusts made by calloused hands instead of pastry chefs. Connor invited me to his girlfriend's family dinner. I brought a smoked turkey breast and a bottle of decent bourbon. She brought me a seat at the table like I'd been coming for years. They didn't ask about smoke and iron. No one brought up London, or the exit, or the articles. They asked what temperature I smoked the meat at, how to keep cornbread moist, and if I thought the Packers had a shot this year. It was perfect. 2 days later, I got a letter in the mail. Real mail, not email. No logo, no legal threats. Just a simple white envelope, addressed by hand. It was from Dean. Inside, a check. $5,000. And a note, just 3 lines. This was the original ask. I should have given it then. I don't want anything in return. Just peace. I stared at it for a long time. Then I walked out back behind Fieldstone, dug a hole with my own hands, and buried it under the frost-hardened dirt. Not the letter. Not the envelope. The check. I didn't want his money. I didn't need his gesture. But I respected the act. Later that week, Sterling called again. I let it ring out. Then his assistant emailed. Just a friendly note. Your retained equity in Smoke and Iron is now worth north of $11 million. London broke records. Tokyo's next. Congrats. I marked it as read. No reply. That night, a snowstorm rolled in hard. Wide out. I could barely see the headlights of my truck through the swirling mess. I stayed at Fieldstone, pulled out the old cot from storage, same one I used to sleep on back in the day. Laid it down in the corner of the kitchen, right next to the dry goods. Slept with a wool blanket over me and the smell of hardwood smoke in the air. I dreamed of nothing. And it was the best sleep I'd had in years. The first day of spring, I unlocked Fieldstone before dawn, same as always. Light cut through the kitchen windows like a promise. I brewed a pot of coffee, pulled out fresh cuts, and started prepping. No fanfare, no news crews, just the sound of a knife on a board. At 7:12 a.m., Connor walked in, apron slung over his shoulder. We full tonight? He asked. Hope not, I said, smiling. I like when there's room for walk-ins. Outside, the sign on the front door had faded from sun and snow. I didn't repaint it. I liked the wear. The truth in it. I poured a second mug of coffee, leaned against the counter, and looked out at the empty dining room. My place. My rules. No noise. No legacy battles. Just food. Just peace. I wasn't chasing anything anymore. Not approval. Not empire. Not even closure. Some people run forever. Me? I stopped. And built something solid where I stood.